Welcome back to Empowerment Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Friedemann. If you want to know more about the work I'm offering, the seminars, the CD series, the books, go to thefearandanxietysolution.com, all in one word, thefearandanxietysolution.com. And if you would like to do some one-on-one sessions, you can set up a free Skype or phone consultation with me. I'm working with clients all over the world, so there is no reason to be stopped from overcoming your fears and anxiety, especially now as we're talking about that fear of intimacy. Now, Mary wrote in the chat box, my husband and I are more distant recently. How do I know whether he or I have an issue with intimacy? That's a really good question, because sometimes you may wonder, who started it? Whose fault is it? I don't think it's mine. Now, Mary, if there is something of the list of symptoms that I told you that sounds familiar to you, that you can take ownership over, then there are chances that you have an issue with intimacy. And the good news is that you working on yourself certainly can do your best to give this relationship a boost and potentially change it. What I often notice in couples, especially if they have been longer together, there is like an adaptation process. When one person pulls back, often the other person also pulls back. When one person has a fear, it almost in an osmotic fashion starts to also affect the other person. Now, the good news is it goes the other way around as well. People that have been working on themselves, that have been finding a way to feel more confident and have more self-love and appreciation, often find the same in their spouses. Relationships don't necessarily need a couples counseling right from the start. If there is a problem in a relationship, I often find it at the beginning more helpful if each of the partners are looking for someone to sort out their own issues, address their own fears and insecurities, and then when they feel better and more centered within, then spending time and discussing together. Because if you come into a counseling session with your own baggage that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with your spouse, you're always projecting that unresolved issue onto the person we are with. And why we do this, I will talk more about later on. Now, if we are talking about the fear of intimacy, we need to also talk about what it means to have a really true and authentic, intimate relationship. Well, there are certainly many definitions, but for me, it feels when we are really connected with someone, we are meeting that person without guards, without defenses, without barriers. And we are willing to be truly ourselves. We are showing that most vulnerable, precious, and deepest part of ourselves without hesitation, with a great sense of trust, with a knowingness that what we have to offer to that person is not only safe in the eyes of that person, but it's also a wonderful gift that we are here to share with our partner. And that happens when we are truly in a relationship that is grounded in intimacy and love and trust. That happens with both. That happens in a level that you meet your partner eye to eye. You meet your partner from your heart, and you do feel truly that the person you're with is your home. You feel with that person connected, and you have all the space, all the room, and all the acceptance and love to expand and fold, grow and change the way you're meant to be. So that may be my definition of intimacy, but it's certainly something that when we experience it is an exquisite feeling, because you don't lose yourself in your partner, and you don't use your partner all the time just as a mirror of yourself or a projection screen where you can put your stuff on. You honor and you respect your partner as an individual that you're blessed to be with and blessed to share yourself with, but you keep also the awareness that you are on your own path and that this person is on his or her own path, and that you are just walking together hand in hand, sharing each other's path, but still have your own challenges, your own purposes, your own goals, and your own desires to meet, and it's not the job of the other person to do that. Now, the fear of intimacy is obviously when we are protecting something inside, when we are protecting that deepest inner, vulnerable, precious part of us. And why do we do that? Why don't we want to show that feels maybe the most fragile, but it is at the same time also the most beautiful aspect of ourselves? Well, it has all to do with how we grew up. Now, here are 3 examples of people that did have these challenges of fear of intimacy, and looking back, they realized it came from how they were raised. Now, one example is a client who was growing up with parents who were always fighting. Now, at some point, the marriage fell apart, they divorced, and the kids were shuffled back and forth between mother and father. After a few years, they both remarried, and unfortunately, the step-parents didn't really appreciate those children of the first marriage. They wanted to have their own children and their own family, and it felt for this client always as if she was an intruder, no matter where she went. And so that feeling of not being loved and not being accepted made her feel that there must be something wrong with her. And not only did the parents not find the kids important enough to stay together, but she also felt that now that the step-parents were rejecting her, that there must be something flawed inside of her. So whenever she went into a relationship, she had that dual mindset of, on the one hand, really wanting to belong and really wanting to have someone that says yes to her, but never really trusting that person, and always looking somehow for ways to make that person wrong or prove herself that he doesn't really mean it seriously and that he's really not the right guy. Now, another example is a client who grew up with a very cold and bossy and critical mother who, no matter how hard he tried to please her, was really never warm and nurturing to him. Now, at some point, he just was angry at her, and he couldn't, of course, express the anger because the mother was way more threatening and mean in many ways. So he stuffed it inside. Now, his relationship pattern later on was that he was a pleaser, and he certainly was an overgiver with women, but at the same time, he was also someone, when he noticed that he didn't get what he wanted or he didn't get the attention that he desired, he got angry and frustrated and had these outbursts. So obviously, these relationships weren't very fulfilling, neither long-lasting. Now, the third example is a client who was always told no by her father, no matter what she wanted. I want to go to the fair? No. I want to see my friends? No. I want to wear a red sweater? No. Everything was a no. And when she was disappointed and hurt, she was ridiculed for crying, for her emotions. So she decided that the way to not feel pain, not feel disappointment, was to shut down and simply to feel nothing. That attitude of I don't care was then also translating into her relationships. She was with men, but she didn't care. She never let them close. She never showed what she was really feeling. And in fact, she didn't even admit to herself that she didn't care about what she was feeling herself. So that block, that closed heart, was not only trying to protect her from others, but also was trying to protect her from the pain and the disappointment that was still inside of her, that baggage that she hadn't dealt with. Now, these are 3 classic examples that show you that fear of intimacy has a lot to do with that, on the one hand, feeling of not being safe, that feeling of, well, when I show who I am, when I express my desires, when I tell people I want to be loved or I want to belong, then we get disappointed or we get rejected or we get abandoned. So that feeling, that need to be safe on the one hand, where you just build up a little wall that doesn't let anyone get close or see what's behind it, is colliding with the other need, which is the need to be loved, the need to belong, the need to finally feel like that somebody sees you and appreciates you. There are two parts on a subconscious level that have two basic needs that these parts are trying to get met, but they don't really know how to met them. And so it's like a tug of war. This is why we go in and out of relationships when we have the fear of intimacy. You have first that need of love when you're alone, and so you go for the relationship, and then that need may go into this obsessive pattern of trying to keep it because the fear of the loss of it is so great. And then lo and behold, when the relationship has problems or where something doesn't seem quite right, the other side kicks in and says, no, this is not safe. We have to run. We have to push away. We have to leave because this is something that, again, can only cause pain and hurt. So that inner conflict needs to be resolved. It needs to be addressed, because otherwise you will always feel that hot, cold, that back and forth, one step in and two steps out of a relationship. But how can we do this? What can we do to resolve that conflict within? When we come back, we will talk about that and more. So stay tuned.